that controls what laws and regulations we make in society.
This is Radio Free Assange.
They are about to take every right away from you. You will not be able to fight for any other cause. We are talking about the fundamentals here. We must fight against the extradition. We must save Julian Assange.
Every single, all the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world dedicating significant resources over the past 10 years to destroying its reputation. So it's at a stage now where it's actually you risk something to even defend him. So the facts are very hard to get out, but when you start looking into it, you see that actually this is not a fair trial at all, and from start to finish it's been irregular. And it's actually a real stain on the British state and the British justice system that they won't live down. I mean, when Edward Snowden tweeted when Assange was grabbed from the embassy by British police, he said something along the lines of this will define Britain's attitude to the free press for generations, and it's true. I mean, that image will live in infamy. So we need to make sure Britain does not become a party to what would be one of the biggest nails in the coffin of the free press that the world has ever seen, maybe the biggest nail in the coffin. So, and for all the people that are watching who live in Britain, you live in the most important jurisdiction for any kind of activism on this topic, because if he goes to the US, he's got no chance. The real chance he has to avoid and his life be saved and avoid extradition is in the UK. So we really need to focus efforts in the run-up to September to expose the irregularities, to expose the bias, and try and get justice.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We're discussing here whether Assange or someone else has done something wrong or not. But what about the war crimes? We are living in a time when our own war crimes are no longer prosecuted. We know that we have conducted aggressive wars. We've hanged people on Nuremberg for this. 175 years for whatever we're accusing Mr. Assange of. It certainly is not violence, certainly is not genocide, certainly is not massacring civilians or torturing anybody. And people for genocide in The Hague, they received 35 or 45 years.
Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange!
You're listening to
Free Assange
Radio.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Basically, I think that Julian Assange is he's a very brave guy. He's a fantastic journalist. He's one of the sort of he's basically being put in prison because he's too good. That's the problem. He's the promise of a free media, which we haven't really had before. We've just had propaganda, and I think that's basically why he's these sort of powerful states such as Britain and the US can't live with him.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free Julian Assange! No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange. Journalism is not a crime. Free Julian Assange.
No extradition!
This is Radio Free Assange.
Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! 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 Julian
Good afternoon, Julian Assange. We are here to support you.
Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange! Free Julian Assange!
23 hours a day in a cell in a high maximum security Ecuadorian embassy and encourage us in our struggle. And in solidarity with Julian Assange.
This is Radio Free Assange.
Les pères fondateurs ne pensaient pas que la tyrannie puisse surgir de l'exécutif, parce qu'ils ne voyaient dans celui-ci rien d'autre que la simple exécution de ce qu'avait décidé le législateur. Nous savons aujourd'hui que le plus grand danger de tyrannie vient de l'exécutif. Mais si nous prenons à la lettre l'esprit de la Constitution, que pensaient les pères fondateurs? Ils pensaient s'être libérés d'abord de la domination de la majorité. C'est pourquoi ce serait une grave erreur de penser que ce que nous avons est une démocratie. Ce que nous avons ici, c'est un système républicain. Les pères fondateurs s'attachaient surtout à préserver les droits des minorités parce qu'ils estimaient que dans un corps politique sain, il doit y avoir une pluralité d'opinions.
L'union sacrée.
This morning in court we heard a testament from two experts from the United States who are testifying about the conditions that Julian Assange will face when incarcerated if he's extradited to the other side. Both pre-trial in Alexandria and in all probability in a supermax prison in Colorado if and when he is sentenced. It was not easy to listen to that. It basically brought back memories about those individuals that we cared about who have actually been incarcerated there in Alexandria in Virginia, and I'm talking about Chelsea Manning. She, of course, was for a very long time held in conditions which were found by the United Nations experts as tantamount to torture. And when you listen to analysis of how these conditions are in Alexandria and Virginia, a jail cell that is 15 square feet, it is about the size of a parking lot, the witness said, and you are held in isolation and which means basically that you have to spend at least 22 hours every day in the cell. You have no opportunity or possibility to communicate with anybody else. Everything is soundproof. There are steel doors, no windows you can open. So you spend time in the cell almost the entire day, and the hour plus hour you are let outside. They make certain that you don't have any contact with other inmates. To think about these conditions for anybody in pre-trial for possibly up to 2 or 3 years, because everybody admits that it will take a long time to prepare his trial, is just a horrible thought. And if he's sentenced to lengthy sentence, will be sent to supermax prison, he can also expect to spend decades even in solitary confinement. It is not unusual, and this is what one can expect. This, of course, underlies this inhumane situation, underlies that it is to be impossible to send anyone over there, especially an individual like Julian Assange, who has committed no crime, but that one of committing journalism.
Kristen, just a follow-up. It seemed like the prosecution was using Kronberg's statements as almost painting these prisons like you were on a holiday at Mar-a-Lago or something.
Yes, it is interesting to hear again and again that the testimonies and the affidavits of Kronberg are being used as an expert testimony of on what awaits Julian, and it is basically a picture painted there of almost like a holiday resort instead of a maximum security prison. What is extraordinary as well is that this individual is not called as a witness. He is not appearing in this court in person. So Julian's lawyers have no way of countering his testimony in cross-examination. That is extraordinary because we are hearing more and more evidence that his affidavits are simply wrong, fabrications of facts. And before last week actually, Julian's lawyers attempted to place into evidence witness statement that directly counteract some of the elements that are persistently coming up and being cited in Kronberg's affidavits. But that opportunity was denied by Judge Bareitzer. So this is one more example of the imbalance and how wrongfully Julian and Julian's interests are treated in this courtroom.
And they talked about, you know, indefinite amount of time in solitary confinement and with no communication to the outside world.
Yes, that is a real possibility, especially because of the nature of the political nature of the persecution Julian is under. You can expect that to happen, and it is not uncommon that that prisoners spend decades in solitary confinement without any access to other people.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We are now approaching the state of Orwell's dictum, perfect dictum, that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls internet servers controls the intellectual record of mankind, and by controlling that, controls our perceptions of who we are, and by controlling that, controls what laws and regulations we make in society.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We are now approaching the state of Orwell's dictum, perfect dictum, that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls internet servers controls the intellectual record of mankind, and by controlling that, controls our perceptions of who we are, and by controlling that, controls what laws and regulations we make in society.
This is Radio Free Assange.
They are about to take every right away from you. You will not be able to fight for any other cause. We are talking about the fundamentals here. We must fight against an extradition. We must save Julian Assange.
Every single, all the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world dedicating significant resources over the past 10 years to destroying his reputation. So it's at a stage now where it's actually you risk something to even defend him. So the facts are very hard to get out. But when you start looking into it, you see that actually this is not a fair trial at all.
So what's your observations this morning?
Well, this morning's witnesses were all about prison conditions in the United States. I'm sorry. So this morning's witnesses were all about the prison conditions in the United States and the conditions under which Julian would be held if he were extradited to the United States. And the defence witnesses were simply laying out what every sensible person knows about the American prison system, and particularly about high-profile so-called enemies of the state as they're held in that system, the degree of solitary confinement that they would face, the inability to speak properly to their lawyers, the fact that they would have 15 minutes a week telephone conversation with their partners, and those conversations would be listened into by the prison authorities. Now, these are extreme punishments by anybody's standards, extreme punishments for people who are being held without having been convicted of any crime. The prosecution's cross-examination was to try and present these as if they were a weekend at a holiday camp, that really it was all perfectly fine, perfectly normal, according to the rules. They'd have medical treatment, they'd have access to other prisoners. Now, objective observers must make up their own mind about that. Do they believe that the American prison system is a lenient prison system? Do they believe that it's a humane prison system? Do they believe that anything they've ever heard about the way in which prisoners are treated would lead them to those conclusions? Or do they believe what these witnesses were saying, and that the punishment would precede conviction, that you would be punished simply for being charged with these crimes, that the degree of solitary confinement, denial of rights, access to lawyers, access to friends and family would be extremely limited and would be monitored, and that these are in any way fair ways in which people could even prepare for a trial.
One of the expert witnesses was telling the story of one of his clients who has been in solitary confinement for 22 years. And this is not Julian Assange, this is a normal bloke that's behaved well, and he has a good conduct inside prison.
Well, we've said from the beginning, and since it's been absolutely clear that Julian Assange would be held under so-called special administrative measures, that this would be an extreme form of isolation. It would be, in effect, a black hole into which Julian Assange would disappear from the moment that he set foot on American territory, unable to communicate properly with his lawyers. His lawyers would be acting illegally if they were to transmit anything that he said to a wider public. In other words, the very last time that you heard Julian Assange's voice would be his last words on British territory. From the moment he was in American territory, neither he nor his lawyers on his behalf would be legally able to transmit what he thought. That's before we get to a trial.
Thank you very much, John.
This is Radio Free Assange.
In breach of anybody's human rights to treat them. These are people who, in the American system as in our system, are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. He will not have been in front of any court or convicted of any charge when he's held in these punitive conditions, which frankly would be unacceptable even if he had been already convicted of a charge. He won't have been convicted of a charge. He will be a completely innocent person in the eyes of the law, subject to the kind of punishment that even convicted criminals shouldn't have to face.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We are now approaching the state of Orwell's dictum. Perfect dictum, that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls internet servers controls the intellectual record of mankind, and by controlling that, controls our perceptions of who we are, and by controlling that, controls what laws and regulations we make in society.
This is Radio Free Assange.
We are now approaching the state of Orwell's dictum, perfect dictum, that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls internet servers controls the intellectual record of mankind, and by controlling that, controls our perceptions of who we are, and by controlling that, controls what law.
This is Radio Free Assange.
They are about to take every right away from you. You will not be able to fight for any other cause. We are talking about the fundamentals here. We must fight against electionism. We must save Julian